This Day in Sports History. And welcome back into another edition of This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. It is December 23rd, and this is a really fun day to look back on throughout sports history for a couple of reasons. First, we had a one-of-a-kind ending in an NFL game. Second, we had one of the all-time greatest upsets in sports history. And we had the emergence of one of the all-time greats. All that's coming your way in just a second, right after this. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, cologne, and many more personal care products in a large variety of scents, you're sure to find something that's perfect for you or that special someone in your life. Check them out at sterlingsoap.com. So let's start with what happened on this day in 1972 in what soon became known as the Immaculate Reception. For everybody except for Raiders fans, this is always a fun one to talk about and rewatch the amazing NFL Films footage captured that day by Ernie Ernst. So the scene is Three Rivers Stadium in Pittsburgh. It's the fourth quarter of the AFC Divisional Playoff game between the Oakland Raiders and the Steelers. The Raiders had just scored their first and only touchdown of the game, and they led 7-6 when the Steelers got the ball back with 1 minute 13 seconds to play and 80 yards to go for the go-ahead score. A couple of Terry Bradshaw completions put Pittsburgh on their own 40, but the drive stalled a bit, leaving the Steelers facing a 4th and 10, or as NFL Films voice John Facenda would later call it, 4th and hopeless. Here's Steelers radio announcer Jack Fleming with the call of the play from that day.
22 seconds remaining. And Bradshaw is back and looking again. Bradshaw running out of the pocket, looking for somebody to throw to, fires it downfield, and there's a collision. It's caught out of the air. The ball is pulled in by Franco Harris. Harris is going for a touchdown for Pittsburgh. Harris is going. 5 seconds left on the clock. Franco Harris pulled in the football. I don't even know where it came from.
Bradshaw's pass was intended for Frenchie Fuqua, and as Fuqua reached for the ball, Jack Tatum delivered a hard hit and the ball ricocheted to Harris, who was trailing the play by about 15 yards. Harris made the catch before it hit the ground and took off for the end zone. Steelers fans stormed the field thinking the game was over, which delayed the ruling. Raiders head coach John Madden argued that the ball had hit Fuqua and then bounced back to Franco. The rule at the time would have made that an incomplete pass.
You could not have a double touch. If Fuqua, when that hand went up, if he touched the ball, as soon as the second player on his team touched the ball, incomplete pass. That's the end of it.
But referee Fred Swearingen conferred with the other officials on the field, and then he went to the dugout and he got on the phone to the chief of NFL officials, Art McNally. After that phone call ended, Swearingen came back to the field, thrust his arms into the air to signal a touchdown, and said that they did not believe Fuqua had touched the ball. After the game, the media was swarming around to get the full story of what happened on that play. Steelers linebacker Andy Russell had the locker next to Fuqua, and he remembers Frenchie's post-game response.
And they said, well, Frenchie, can you explain what happened exactly? He said, well, the ball bounced off my chest. And I knew that that's not the right answer. Frenchie didn't know the rule, and he just was talking. He didn't really know what happened because he got hit in the head. And I grabbed him and said, Frenchie, no, what you meant to say was...
Raider tight end Raymond Chester also had a post-game convo with Fuqua.
After the game, Frenchie came into the locker room, and he leaned over to me, and he said in my ear, he said, you know the ball hit me. I said, yeah, I know the ball hit you. He said, yeah, it did hit me, but that's the way it goes. And that's a true statement.
Nothing could be done about it at that point. The Steelers had won the game and they advanced in the playoffs, and it sets up an interesting what if. There are a lot of Pittsburgh folks who credit the win in this game as the spark to the Steelers' dominance in the postseasons to come. Would the Steelers have won 4 Super Bowls in the next 10 years if the Immaculate Reception had been simply an incomplete pass? One other interesting fact, the term immaculate reception was first used by Pittsburgh sportscaster Myron Cope later that night on his 11 o'clock sportscast. One of his viewers, Sharon Levosky, called the station that night and suggested the name. It's been called the greatest game never seen, but it is certainly one that you've heard a lot about. On this day in 1982, it was the greatest upset in college basketball history as the Chaminade Silver Swords beat Ralph Sampson and the Virginia Cavaliers 77-72. Chaminade was a member of the NAIA at the time and had only had a basketball team for 6 years. Virginia, on the other hand, was ranked number 1 in the NCAA, and Sampson was the 3-time National Player of the Year. The Cavaliers were a little road-weary. They were on their way back to the States after a 2-game road trip to Japan. The Cavs had beaten 13th-ranked Houston by 9 in Game 1 of that trip, and then handled Utah by 23. So maybe a little jet lag was involved, maybe a good dose of overconfidence played into it, but still, this should have been a rout by all indications. Instead, at half, it was all tied at 43. Virginia came out in the second and took a 7-point lead, but the Silver Swords fought back and took a 70-68 lead with 1 minute 37 seconds left. They were able to then hit a few free throws down the stretch and then close out the deal on the upset. Sampson only had 12 points, and despite towering over Chaminade's center Tony Randolph by 8 inches, he was outscored by 7. There was not any television coverage of this game, and only some brief snippets from home movies still exist, so only the 3,000 at the Blaisdell Center that night were actual witnesses to it. But soon, everybody heard about it.
I just can't believe it, beating the number 1 team in the nation, Chaminade, and people asking, where is Chaminade, what is a Chaminade? And yet, everybody in the world, nation gonna know, there is a team in Chaminade.
If I said, we stayed within 4 points, we did a hell of a job. But we winning by 5, my God, that's a dream come true.
When these events happen, the line that gets repeated over and over is, this game put such and what on the map. Well, though overused, it does fit Chaminade perfectly. This game led to the establishment of the Maui Invitational, and it's hosted by Chaminade each year. After the loss, Cavalier head coach Terry Holland suggested to Chaminade's athletics director to consider developing a tournament, and so he did. The first edition was held in 1984, and the most recent edition of the Maui Invitational was played over Thanksgiving weekend, featuring 8 teams including the Silver Swords, with the USC Trojans claiming the title. From there, we go to another exciting football game. On this day in 1962, it was the AFL Championship game between the Houston Oilers and the Dallas Texans. 34-year-old George Blanda led the Oilers to an 11-3 record despite the fact he threw a league-leading 42 interceptions against 27 touchdowns. Blanda's 42 interceptions is the most ever in a season of professional football, and it's not even close. Vinny Testaverde is number 2 on that ignominious list with 35, and that 1988 Tampa team finished with a 5-11 record. So Blanda's 42 picks was the theme of the year, and that theme continued in the title game. Blanda threw 2 interceptions in the first half of this one that led to Texan points and a 17-0 lead at halftime. But Blanda regrouped in the second half while the Texans went conservative to try to wind the clock. Blanda led a drive to open up the half that resulted in 7 for the Oilers. Here's Kurt Gowdy with the call that day.
Second down, 10 to go for Houston on the Dallas 15. Blanda's pass, touchdown! Willard Duval from Southern Methodist University scores.
In the fourth, he kicked a field goal and led the Oilers on another touchdown-scoring drive to tie it up at 17, and the game went to a sudden death overtime. Blanda got a little sloppy again in the first OT and threw 2 more picks, his 4th and 5th of the day. Neither team scored in the first OT, and so they went to a second one. The Texans pounced with the extra time. Len Dawson threw a 10-yarder to Jack Spikes and then handed it off to him for a 19-yard pickup, and that set up Texans kicker Tommy Booker to kick the game winner. Here's Kurt Gowdy again.
All right, 4th down. Dallas on the 18-yard line of Houston in the second overtime period can win the game if this field goal is good. The game is tied 17-17. Crossing a hole in the 24. And watch it. The big rush is on. The kick is up. The kick is good. Dallas is the champion. Dallas wins it on a 24-yard field goal by Tommy Brooker.
This game lasted 77 minutes and 54 seconds. It's the longest ever championship game, and it's the second longest game in history. The only game that lasted longer also included the Texans franchise. By 1971, the franchise had moved to Kansas City and become the Chiefs. And that year, they played an 82-plus minute game against Miami. And we'll talk about that game on the 25th. Of course, Dallas got a new team after the Texans moved to KC, and on this day in 1972, the Cowboys were the defending Super Bowl champs, and they were playing in the NFC Divisional playoff game against San Francisco. Roger Staubach had been the guy that led the Cowboys to their first Super Bowl win the season before, but a separated shoulder early in the season had sidelined him, and Craig Morton had taken over. Even though Staubach was back to full health by this point, Coach Tom Landry preferred Morton's drop-back passing to Roger Dodger's riskier approach. But after the 49ers built up a 28-13 lead in the third quarter, Landry made the switch to Staubach. It was the turning point, though not immediately. They managed a field goal to make it 28-16, but then they went cold for a spell. When they got the ball back with 1 minute 53 seconds left, they were still down 12, and things looked grim for the Cowboys. In fact, San Francisco fans were so sure they were moving on that they were heading to the exits. So were the Niners' assistant coaches in the press box. They had packed up their stuff and were on their way down in the elevator when Staubach started picking apart the San Francisco secondary. 4 passes is all it took for Staubach to hit Billy Parks for 6. The PAT made it a 5-point game, and then Mel Renfro recovered the onside kick to give the ball back to Dallas. With time ticking down under a minute, Staubach cemented his trademark as Captain Comeback with this play.
Mike Montgomery is in the backfield as a setback, along with Walt Garrison. Parks is to the right and Hayes is to the left, and back goes. The throw is into the end zone, and it's a touchdown to the tight end. A touchdown in there. No, Ron Sellers. Sellers makes the grab. Windland Hall is the man he beat. The Cowboys have wrestled away the lead.
In 1 minute, 1 second, the Cowboys had scored 14 points, and now they led by 2. Charlie Waters snuffed any hopes of a Niner retaliation when he picked off John Brody's pass, and the Cowboys advanced 30-28. Even though Dallas would lose the following week to Washington, Staubach's heroics set in motion Craig Morton's trade to Denver and a decade of dominance for Staubach and the Cowboys. Time now for today's Zippo to Do with Sports fun fact.
What did you say?
John Candy was paid only $414 for his role in Home Alone. He did it as a favor to his friend John Hughes. The minor characters in the movie were paid by days on set, and John Candy filmed all of his scenes in 1 day. The pizza guy character actually made more money from this film than John Candy.
Say what?
This has been an original Thrive Suite production.